It is schedule release day. There is the Eagles 2025 schedule as we know it. What is your initial reaction? That is a pretty brutal schedule, my friend.
Yeah, it is. And we knew they were going to have a tough schedule. The fact that they play, how many, was that 2 Monday nights, a Saturday, a Friday, a couple Thursdays, they're going to be all over as the NFL will try to capitalize on the Eagles' popularity, get them on national TV as much as they can. I will tell you, I believe it's the third straight year the Eagles come to Tampa in September. Yeah. It's miserable. I ain't going to the game again this year. Why they keep bringing them down here in September is beyond me, but I'm not going.
All we need is a Tuesday or a Wednesday game now, Bill, and the schedule will be complete.
Right. How about Kansas City or Dallas and Kansas City, the first 2 games?
Yeah.
Whew. It's going to be tough out of the blocks, but hey, this is a good team, and they're the team to beat.
Speaking of the Cowboys, I love the fact that the Eagles and Cowboys will kick off the NFL season on September 4th. The Eagles will get to raise the banner and show off the Lombardi trophy with the stinking Cowboys on the other sideline. That is going to be cool.
Yeah, and then go to Kansas City where they're going to be ready to play. So, the thing, we're not going to get too much into this. The thing about this NFL season and all the NFL seasons now and the way camps go and all that, you got to get to about the 5th game to get guys really in shape and really playing. So, there's a lot of key matchups here early in the year, but, you got guys guys get hurt and all that early in the year. They're just rusty still. Well, hey, Chad, as you mentioned, due to some scheduling issues, you and I visited with Fran Duffy last night to deep dive into the NFL draft, the Eagles, and more. I tell you what, we covered a bunch, and this is football gold for those of you that like the draft and like the Eagles.
Yeah, man, Fran knows his stuff, and everyone pay attention because there will be a quiz following the interview with Fran. Here we go.
All right, and with that, let's welcome NFL draft analyst for All City Network and the Eagles coverage for PHLY, Fran Duffy. Welcome back, Fran. It's been a long time.
Bill, Chet, it's a pleasure. It has been a long time, but excited to chat it up with you guys.
Great to see you again, Fran. Let's get started with this one. Were you surprised at all that the Eagles were able to strike a deal to keep tight end Dallas Goedert around for another year? And what does that mean for an already loaded Eagles offense?
Yeah, if you asked the version of myself in like mid-March, late March, yes, that version would be surprised. Once we got through the draft and nothing happened and the Eagles did not draft a tight end, it felt like this was an inevitability. I think because, look, at the end of the day, the Eagles are a better team. It's a better offense with Dallas Goedert on the roster. They were not going to just outright release him. That would have been shocking for me. So I think that, okay, well, if they can't get a deal done, musical chairs kind of ended in terms of the tight end market being solidified. There was a great tight end class in the draft, and I think that kind of, it certainly affected this situation. So once you got through draft weekend and there was no deal set with another team, I felt like it was only a matter of time before this situation kind of turned out similar to what happened with Josh Sweat a year ago, where it's okay, let's come to some kind of settlement, some kind of agreement, one year deal, both sides happy, and then we'll kind of go our separate ways here a year from now. And who knows? Maybe things change and they're able to come to some kind of a long-term extension by the time we get to 2026. But no, I think once we got to that part of the calendar, this was not surprising.
Hey, Fran, before we dive into the Eagles, because we're going to get into all that, what was your take on the Travis Hunter deal between Jacksonville right off the shoot? 2 firsts, a second, a 4th. Is Travis Hunter that kind of guy? It almost seems like a heist for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, he's everyone throws around generational prospect, and I'm not one to throw that out just because it gets used so often. There's no way there are this many generational players. I will say that Travis Hunter is a generational profile. We just don't see guys come along that, play to the level that he did on both sides of the ball, basically at 100% of the time. That just does not happen in today's game. So that is truly unique. I do think, look, I did something with him that I've never done before. We've seen some two-way players over the course of, the last decade or so in college football. Like, again, no one that did it to the level of Travis Hunter, but I ended up doing a completely separate report on Travis Hunter, the wide receiver, and on Travis Hunter, the corner. And the way I basically approached it was, all right, if he were only to focus on corner, this is how I would write him up. If he were to only focus on receiver, this is how I'd write him up. In my final big board that I made available on my draft guide over with PHLY, the corner version of Travis Hunter was my number 2 overall player. The wide receiver version of Travis Hunter was my number 3 overall player. So it just gives you an idea of just the overall talent level for this kid. Now, depending on how this snap share kind of divvies out, if he's going to be a 100% wide receiver and a 20% corner, or 100% corner, and he's going to play 15 snaps a game at wide receiver, that's going to affect how that value kind of shakes out, right? If you're only going to play wide receiver 15 snaps a game, you're not the number 1 wide receiver on the board. But I think when you look at his overall talent level, he's a special player. All that to say, it was a little bit rich from my blood, what Jacksonville did. I applaud the aggressiveness. I think that it's really, it's certainly fun to watch as a consumer of the draft and of the NFL. But to me, a little bit too rich from my blood. I agree with you. I think Cleveland made off well in that deal.
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on him in the NFL for sure. All right, the Eagles draft. Most experts gave the Birds at least a B, some, even higher, but some folks were skeptical of the guy who was taken at the very end of the second round, implying that was still too high for him. I'm talking, of course, about Texas safety Andrew Mukuba. What's your assessment of him, Fran?
Yeah, I enjoyed watching Mukuba. This is a player that I've studied going back to his freshman year at Clemson when he first popped on film for me. I was studying a former Clemson defensive back at the time, and I remember seeing this really aggressive safety come flying from the deep part of the field down into the flat, making a tackle. I'm like, who is this guy? The guy came down in a blur. I'm like, oh, he's a true freshman. Like, all right, let's write his name down for the future, and ended up being Mukuba. He became a 4-year starter at college, 3 years at Clemson, 1 year at Texas. And this year at Texas was when the production really took off. I mean, he only had 1 pick in his first 3 seasons in college with the Clemson Tigers. He had 5 last year with the Longhorns on one of the better defenses in college football. You had playmakers at all 3 levels, and he was certainly a guy that kind of set the benchmark there in the secondary. And I think when you're looking at Mukuba, what stands out about him is the physicality and the aggressiveness, but then also the instincts in zone coverage. And that's something that I think really kind of made him attractive for Vic Fangio and this Eagles defense. We know how much zone defense they play on the back end there under Fangio. And so, for me, like when I'm looking at it in a vacuum and I'm evaluating all these guys on an island, right? So scheme agnostic, not projecting forward into any one system. Mukuba, he was a little bit lower for me. Basically, the way I had it was I had Malachi Starks and Nick Emenwari basically as like 1A, 1B, almost identical grades at the top of my board at safety. And then I had a cluster of like 4 or 5 guys. And Mukuba was in that group, Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, Jonas Sanker from Virginia. I had a bunch of these guys all kind of clustered together. And I had Mukuba the lowest of that cluster, but all of them were so bunched together. And it was like, all right, well, if you like the physicality of Mukuba, you've got that, but he's a little bit lighter. He's the smaller of those 4 players. Maybe Xavier Watts had the best ball skills, but he wasn't as rangy or as explosive as Mukuba. Winston was the biggest and the most physical, but not as athletic as these other guys. And Sanker didn't have like 1 A+ trait, but he was just really well-rounded, and he was like B+ across the board. And so really it comes down to a matter of like, all right, what makes sense for your scheme and for your system. And I think when you're Vic Fangio, you're the Eagles. I just like the Travis Hunter thing, I applaud the aggressiveness because it takes something to kind of stick your neck out and say, all right, we have this cluster of players at a position. This is our guy, right? To show the vindication, like, we're going to pick this guy above everybody else. But I get why they got to that situation. He does need to clean some things up from like a tackling standpoint. He'll miss some tackles. The weight is a little, a sub 200-pound safety can be a little bit concerning, but the instincts, the physicality, we know how physical this Eagles defense was, especially in the second half down the stretch. I mean, in the playoffs, that was their identity. They were just going to out physical every team that they went up against, and you saw it in every single playoff game. He's going to step in and be able to fit that mentality right away. And so, I definitely see why they got to that decision to make him the 64th pick of the draft.
Hey, Fran, I had 2 favorites on the defensive side of the ball. Jalen Walker being one that I knew they probably couldn't get unless they made a big deal. The other was Jihad Campbell, and they got him. And, man, I really am excited about that pick.
Yeah, Campbell's fun. Honestly, I personally liked Campbell more than Jalen Walker, in every facet. Everyone talked about Walker's versatility and, he can come down over the guard and he can rush the passer and he gives you all this versatility there. I struggled with him. Everybody, you talk about like hybrid defenders in today's game. And there's a fine line between hybrid and it used to be, and you guys remember this, like everybody was a tweener coming out. Oh, this guy's like, he's kind of stuck in between. To me, Jalen Walker was on the wrong side of that debate in my eyes. I struggled with what is his best fit. With Campbell, I thought he was a better off-ball backer than Walker. And honestly, I thought he had more upside as a rusher than Walker. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, there is some risk involved. This is a guy that was basically for everybody a consensus top 20, top 15 type of player in this draft. Now, this was a lesser draft than a typical year, but he was considered to be a top 15 talent by most teams. But he was off a number of boards due to injury. He had the shoulder surgery right after the combine. There's reports that he might have to get this other shoulder on the opposite side worked on after the season. Some people worried about a knee as well. This has been a knock on a number of Alabama players for the last 2 decades. The guys come in just, they beat up, just from the rigors of daily work there, playing for Nick Saban, and obviously only 1 year removed from the Saban era. And so I think when you're looking at Campbell, only 2 years at linebacker, so there's, he's a little bit green, but to me, the size, the physicality, the tackling, he's as sure a tackler as you're going to get coming out of the college ranks, especially for a guy with his physical gifts. So there's a lot to like there. I'm excited about his upside. He was my number one linebacker in this class. And yeah, I agree with you, Bill. He's a guy that I'm excited about in this defense.
As I put up a graphic of the other Eagles picks, all the picks, as a matter of fact, any of those that stand out for you, Fran, either in a positive way or ones that you maybe aren't so high on?
Yeah, honestly, when I went back as the draft ended, day 2 didn't go their way, right? They traded down multiple times, so they ended up with a boatload of day 3 picks. And as I was going through, on Monday after the draft, Sunday after the draft, and just kind of going pick by pick and saying, all right, hey, what's the reasoning behind this pick? How did they come to this decision? A lot of these were fair bets. I get Ty Robinson. I thought that value was really strong. A lot of people were talking about him as early as round 2. That was a little early, a little rich for me. So getting him in the 4th round, I think was perfectly fine. This is a guy that tested extremely well, really high character, playing for Matt Rule out at Nebraska. Now, a little concerning that this is a 6th-year senior who didn't really break out production-wise until this 6th year. He had been a 3 or 4 year starter, but he didn't really post numbers until he was a 23-year-old going up against the younger guys. And so that's always a little concerning for me in today's game. I would say the one that I'm most excited about, probably Mac McWilliams. This is a guy at Central Florida who played primarily on the outside, but with his size profile, probably projects better to playing as a nickel corner. But I like the instincts. I like the physicality and competitiveness. This is a guy that, to me, going down to the Senior Bowl, I thought he was one of the best corners down there in Mobile, did an outstanding job in one-on-ones where you really saw those route instincts show up. And so Mac McWilliams is a guy that catches my eye. And then they took a number of flyers on offensive linemen. Drew Kendall has the highest floor. The backup center that they think has some guard flexibility. I kind of think that he's probably more of a center only moving into the NFL, but I really liked his floor. I feel really good about him sticking in the NFL. And then they took the 2 tackles, Miles Hinton from Michigan and Cam Williams from Texas. And the way I would describe both guys are kind of like boom bust, high variance players. With Miles Hinton, the variance is wide, but it's, kind of like, think of it like the middle of the screen, the heart monitor. With Cam Williams, the highs are higher. The upside, to me, is bigger there with Williams, but the lows are lower. There's some ugly film out there with Cam Williams, and a lot of that happened down the stretch. He took a lot of penalties, gave up a lot of sacks. It was only 1 year as a starter. But the way I look at Cam Williams, guys, and we know this is the time where it's a lot of the too early 2026 mock drafts, looking ahead to next year in college football. Cam Williams would have been on a lot of those mock drafts. He would have been a guy that would have appeared in a lot of those where people were projecting forward. Hey, this year was a little bit up and down, but one more year as a starter. This is a guy with that top level talent. So to get him in the 6th round, I think it's a fair swing to try and take.
Fran, before we get to moving on to next year's draft, we want to talk a little bit about that. I have to ask you, as a unbiased guy that does this for a living, what the heck happened to Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I guess honestly not that long. At the end of the day, look, when I studied Shedeur Sanders last summer, so off of his junior film, I thought, okay, this guy has the like low end starter, high end backup type of tape. To me, that was someone and that is not, unique for guys that are coming in. Sometimes players that are, in first round mock drafts, I watched him the year before, and it's like, yeah, like he can grow into that, if he takes the next steps. Well, he didn't take the next steps. There were flashes, but the thing with Shedeur is that, and I wrote this in my profile, going into this past season, is that he needed to be like a pocket assassin, because he's not a plus arm talent. Like, he's not going to wow you with his velocity and with the way that he can drive the football. He's accurate. He throws with good touch, but he's not a great athlete to get himself out of trouble. And so when you're looking at like the physical dimensions, the physical talent is not quite there. So in order for him to be a first round caliber quarterback, he's got to be nails mentally, right? And that means like knowing where to go with the football, understanding how to manage a muddy pocket. And that's, to me, honestly, Bill, that's the area where he really struggled, is being able to manage the pocket, understand, like, sacks, a lot of the people will point to offensive linemen. That's as much a quarterback stat as anything else, and every sack is a little bit different. I'm not saying every single one of those sacks was on Shedeur, but that was an area in terms of like his pocket management where I thought he regressed this year. It was already a little bit of an issue for him based off the junior film, and I thought that he developed some really bad habits this past year and things that honestly he would not be able to get away with moving into the college level. And then you take into account everything else coming with him. Obviously, by all accounts, like, just did not handle the pre-draft process well when it comes to like the interviews with teams, going back to the Shrine Bowl, the combine, didn't take 30 visits, said, I'm only going to do with a handful of teams. And, that came back to work against him until it was too late. And so I think at the end of the day, it was a confluence of factors there. It was a big combination, but it certainly resulted in him falling a lot further than anybody really imagined.
Fran, of the Eagles' division rivals, the Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders, of course, who had the best draft? And what do you think of the Giants' selection of Jackson Dart?
Yeah, Chet, not a big Jackson Dart guy personally. I struggled with him, and this is a player. I talked about him in the summer with some area scouts down, that cover the Southeast, and basically all the conversations were, like, maybe early day 3, this is a guy that doesn't have like plus physical talent, kind of like what we're talking about with Shedeur. He's not going to wow you from a physical standpoint. He's pretty athletic, but the arm and the accuracy, is just okay. It's more like product of the system, product of the scheme. And it's an outstanding offense down there with Lane Kiffin. And it was like, all right, get through the season. Kind of same deal. Anyone I talked with, I like him on day 3. I like him on day 3. Senior Bowl, I'm down there. I watched every single throw in practice. Same deal. Talk with everyone. Solid. It wasn't like all inspiring. Then we get to February, and that's when like the buzz started building. Oh, like he could get into day 2, and then it was like, oh, he might get into day 1. And it's like it got so crazy, and people were talking about him going like number 3, number 9, and I'm like, that was way too rich for me. And I know that there were a lot of people in the league that felt the same way, area scouts that felt the same way, and so I still, at the end of the day, was surprised that he ended up being a first round pick. I hope he succeeds. I hope all these guys obviously do well, but that one very much surprised me. I know that, there were a lot of guys. It was one of those things where you talk with coaches, you talk with players that were, in that building at Ole Miss, and they all swear by him. But I remember talking with a scout in like late March, early April about it. And he was like, yeah, like, a lot of quarterbacks, like that's the case, right? That alone shouldn't be able to get you drafted in the first round. So we'll see how that works out, for the Giants. But to the first part of your question, Chet, I would say of the 3 teams, it's close between Washington and Dallas, but I would have to go with Dallas. I really like the way that they approached the draft this year. I was interested to see what they would do. Picking at 12. Many people felt like, all right, they want a pass catcher. It's going to be a receiver, and so. When, going in, I was like, all right, if Tetero McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, falls to them at 12, that's going to be the pick. And the question I had for a lot of people and all the conversations I had was, all right, well, what if McMillan is off the board? If he goes, there was rumors about, him going number 5 to Jacksonville, or if he went, well, obviously he went number 8 to Carolina, but if he went to 9 to the New Orleans Saints, like which way is Dallas going to go? Are they still going to go and force receiver, or are they going to go line of scrimmage and maybe go best player available kind of situation? Because for me, Matthew Golden at 12 overall, that just never added up for me. Nice player, but not a guy that I viewed as a top 15 pick. And most people I spoke with felt the same way. Now, when I asked that question, it was, Oh, yeah, I think they're going to go receiver. Now, I applaud them for not doing that and saying, yeah, you know what, like we need a receiver, but we are going to go best player available. I love the addition of Tyler Booker. I think that's a guy. You lose Zach Martin, you lose Tyron Smith the last couple of years, someone to really just kind of raise the floor of that offense. I think he's plug and play starter, and it's going to be a really fun battle to watch with he and Jalen Carter now for the next decade plus between those two guys twice a year. We'll see that in week 1. And then going around 2, they get the local kid and Donovan Ezeraku, the pass rusher from Boston College, who I was not the biggest fan of in round 1, but you get to round 2, I think it's a little bit more palpable for my liking. And then I love what they did in round 3. Siobhan Revel, the corner from ECU. This is a first round talent who, he's an older player who started his career at junior college, then goes to ECU, starts his first year there, and then tears his ACL a couple games into year 2. But he's 6'1", 6'2", long arms, 4.3 speed, production, through the roof on a per snap basis. Guy that can play the ball in the air. He's physical. I mean, it's like the comparison I would make for Eagles fans that are listening. It's like, imagine DRC, right? So you have like long, explosive, can turn and run with anybody, but extremely physical and competitive. Like it's going to do all the dirty work, and he's a really, really fun player. So if he's older, from a smaller school, didn't play a ton, coming off an ACL, that part of the profile is worrisome. But the film, he's a first round talent. So I do like what the Dallas Cowboys did. Unfortunately for Eagles fans in the draft.
Hey, Fran, I want to look real quick at next year because I know you're already working on it. Drew Aller out of Penn State is already looked upon to be one of the top quarterbacks. Arch Manning hasn't played a lot yet. We're going to get a look at him, but I also wanted to get a quick take from you on Nick Singleton and Katron Allen out of Penn State. We got a bunch of first round picks again coming out of Happy Valley.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're looking at Aller, it certainly seems like he's going to be a first-round pick. I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper onto the film. Basically, what I've seen so far, first of all, I love that offense. Schematically, it's just a very fun offense to study. They got really creative last year. I know it was the first year in that system. Now, it can be tough to disentangle some of that when you're trying to evaluate Aller in a vacuum, right? And so when I look at Aller, I think, number one, his ability to be kind of a caretaker offensively, I think that's one of his strong suits. He rarely puts the ball in harm's way. I think we all kind of latch on to that final throw against Notre Dame, the interception, middle of the field, but that has been more the exception than the rule. I think when you're looking at Drew Aller. So honestly, like when I'm projecting him forward, and I've not completely done my study of him. I'm going to do more here in the coming weeks, but I actually want to see him push the limits a little bit further. Like I want to see him try more of those throws, moving forward into his senior year. And so, for me, when I look at him, I'm hoping that we see him kind of let his hair down a little bit and really kind of push the limits as a passer. To me, like that's what I like about Garrett Nussmeier, from LSU is that, like, he's going to throw some interceptions, but he's going to push the limits and test some tight window throws. He doesn't have the arm that Drew Aller has, to be honest. But to me, I like the way that Nussmeier plays the position a little bit more. And then you get to Arch Manning. I mean, the guy started 2 games. I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, but the talent is outstanding. And the way that he's going to operate Sarkisian's offense, I tend to think he's not going to come out in this draft. I tend to think that he's probably going to go back for another year. I just don't think that a Manning is going to be coming out of college football as a 1-year starter. I think that he's going to put more time on task at the college level before he does that. But I'm legitimately giddy to watch him in that offense because I'm a big fan of Sarkisian and what they do. So just seeing him kind of operate that offense should be a lot of fun.
Hey, Fran, one final Eagles question I'm going to sneak in. I don't think anybody's expecting Saquon Barkley to have a second straight 2,000-yard regular season. I mean, you never know. But do you look for Jalen to throw the ball more often this coming season, which would probably make AJ and DeVonta quite happy?
Yeah, my guess is that this does become a little bit more of a pass first operate. Not I shouldn't say pass first, but I do think that the ratio tilts back a little bit more towards the pass game. And we've talked about this over on the PHLY Eagle Show. Myself, Bo Wolf, Zach Berman is just kind of the direction of this offense. And honestly, like you look at this team, they're Super Bowl favorites as we sit here in mid-May. And I think when you're projecting them forward, and I know this is schedule week, so we're going to be talking about the season here in the coming days. I think when you're looking at this team, They had the number one defense in football. Defense is very volatile year to year. You know, so it's tough to expect that they're going to have a repeat performance, especially when you consider the fact that they lost some key players up front. So they're going to have some guys stepping up into new roles. And then offensively, I mean, who are you expecting to be better than they were, the better versions of themselves than they were a year ago, right? You had Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, DeVonta Smith. Honestly, when I look at it, I'm like, the guy that can take his game to the next level on a more consistent basis might be Jalen, right? It would be a guy like, all right, as a passer, if he's able to take that next step on a consistent basis, obviously he was lights out down the stretch in the postseason. But if he can play that way over the course of the regular season, I think that probably means more production in the pass game and certainly more for AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith.
Fran, one final question for me. You sat in the building for a lot of years there with the Eagles. Howie Roseman went from the village idiot to a genius in the draft. How did the system come together? It's not luck, I don't think. You got to have your homework done, and then you got to be fortunate, obviously. But how did Howie Roseman turn this thing around?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the draft is a tough cookie to crack. I think when you're looking at it, and that's not even the right analogy, the tough nut to crack. But I think when you're looking at it, look, there is a little bit of variance involved here, right? Where it's people evaluating people, and there's a lot of unknown in that. And so, to me, when you're looking at it, I think that you see coaches, you see general managers, talent evaluators, they're going to go on runs, and sometimes you're really, really hot. I think of John Schneider in Seattle. They were on that heater for like a 2 or 3 year stretch where they couldn't miss. And then they go like 7-8 years where it's like, man, what did they draft? Like one Pro Bowl in this stretch, right? And obviously, look, I think when you're looking at Howie, to me, when I'm looking at decision makers across the NFL, I look at it by process, and decision making from that standpoint. And to me, being in that building, I trust the way that Howie Roseman kind of sets the table for everybody. I think that one of the best qualities of the in his cupboard is that and this is from talking with so many people that have been in and out of that room over the course of the last decade plus, is that he does an outstanding job, especially over the last few years, of making sure that everybody's voice is heard. So if you are assistant coach, if you're a coordinator, if you're an area scout, if you're with the analytics team, if you're with player development, if you are on the strength staff, whoever you are, if you've got a voice in this building, the medical staff, everybody that has these touch points with these players, you're going to feel that you are involved and your voice is being heard in this process. And at the end of the day, you're not going to find consensus. There are too many people, in that room where it's very rare that, you're going to have 15 reports on a player in a building. When you look at everybody all the way up, scouting assistants up, they might have reports on Jahad Campbell. Not all 15 people saw him the same, right? Some people may have graded him as a Pro Bowler. Some people may have graded him as a backup. Some people may have graded him as an edge rusher. Some may have graded him as a Mike linebacker or a Sam linebacker, right? Everybody's going to have different viewpoints. But at the end of the day, you want to collect all of that information. You want to get everybody in. Let's hash it out. Let's talk it through and try and get as close to a consensus as we possibly can. And at the end of the day, when we draft a guy, when we make that phone call, that guy's an Eagle now. Now it's all of our jobs to set that guy up for success. And some teams, I think, are better at that than others. And I think that's something that Howie has done a really good job of kind of fostering that environment over the last several years.
Fran, it's been a 6-year wait, but man, this was worth it. It was a lot of fun. Tell our viewers where they can find you on PHLY.
Yeah, so you can go and check us out over at PHLY, allphly.com. And that's where, look, I've got all my scouting reports on this entire draft class are up there now. By the way, and if you're looking for scouting reports on all these NBA draft and NHL draft prospects, we've got all that covered over there as well. Yes. But yeah, Eagles coverage with Bo and with Zach on a daily basis. We have one show a day, every 5 days a week. We're writing articles. We've got all kinds of stuff. So you can go check us out there. You can follow me on Twitter, on Blue Sky, wherever you get your Eagles content.
All right, Fran. Well, we appreciate it. Let's do it again. And it's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it, guys. We'll talk again soon.